He was a titan of finance, a man who had everything: power, wealth, and a beautiful, quiet wife. But he wanted more. He told his wife he was going on a business trip. Instead, he took his young mistress to the most exclusive 5-star hotel in the city, the Aurelia Grand. He ordered champagne, laughed at his own deception, and prepared for a weekend of indulgence. He never saw her coming. He was about to learn that the woman he'd underestimated was the one who owned it all. Richard Vance believed the world was built for men like him. He moved through it with the frictionless ease of a man who had never been told no. His suits were bespoke, his handshake was firm, and his voice carried the unshakable confidence of someone who saw life as a series of transactions he was destined to win. His firm, Vance Capital, was his monument, a sleek, glass and steel testament to his brilliance in the cutthroat world of private equity. His wife, Elara Vance, was, in his eyes, his most beautiful acquisition. She was elegance personified, with a quiet grace that was perfect for hosting the charity galas and political fundraisers that smoothed the edges of his ruthless reputation. She was the perfect partner, beautiful, silent, and entirely dependent. He saw her as a delicate porcelain doll, someone to be displayed in their sprawling, sterile mansion in the hills, a home she curated with an artist's eye, but which held all the warmth of a museum. "Elara, darling," he'd said that Monday morning, straightening the silk tie of his $500 Charvet. "This Tokyo deal is heating up. I have to fly out tonight, probably through the weekend." Elara paused, her hand hovering over a white orchid. "Oh? That's sudden." Her voice was soft, melodic, and utterly devoid of suspicion. "I thought the Matsuyas weren't meeting until next month." Richard waved a dismissive hand. "Things change fast, darling. You know that. It's all high level. Don't worry your pretty head about it." He kissed her on the cheek, a dry, proprietary gesture. "Just make sure you confirm the catering for the hospital fundraiser, and try the salmon this time. The beef was too dry last year." He didn't notice the look in her eyes as he walked away, a look not of sadness, but of cold, clear calculation. He didn't see her watch him from the window, his driver loading his monogrammed Louis Vuitton luggage into the back of the black Bentley. He didn't know that she knew. He didn't know she knew there was no Tokyo deal. He didn't know she knew he wasn't going to the airport. And he certainly didn't know she knew about Chloe Jensen. Chloe was his protégée at the firm. 26, ambitious, with a sharp mind and an even sharper wardrobe, she worshipped Richard. She saw him as a god of finance and saw herself as his rightful queen. Their affair had been going on for 6 months, a reckless, exhilarating game of stolen glances in the boardroom and late-night strategy sessions that fooled no one except, Richard assumed, his naive wife. An hour after leaving his mansion, Richard's Bentley didn't pull up to the private airfield. It pulled up to the glittering, bronze and glass facade of the Aurelia Grand, the city's newest and most opulent 5-star hotel. It was a palace of modern luxury, a place where the air itself seemed to cost money. Chloe was waiting for him in the lobby, sipping a complimentary cucumber-infused water, looking artfully nervous. "Richard," she breathed, standing up as he approached. "Ms. Jensen," he said, loud enough for the staff to hear, before leaning in for a kiss that was far from professional. "Let's check in." He strode to the front desk, exuding power. "Reservation for Vance. Richard Vance, the presidential suite." The concierge, a polished woman named Sylvie, smiled brightly. "Of course, Mr. Vance. Welcome to the Aurelia Grand. We have you confirmed for 3 nights. Will you be needing separate keys?" "Just the 2," Richard said, sliding his private black Amex card across the marble counter. He put a possessive arm around Chloe's waist. "My associate will be joining me for this strategy session." Sylvie didn't blink. "Very good, sir. The bellman will take your bags. The presidential suite is on the 50th floor. It has a remarkable view." "I expect nothing less," Richard said. As they walked toward the private elevators, Chloe giggled. "An associate, Richard? Really?" "Business and pleasure, darling." He winked, squeezing her hand. "This weekend we're going to celebrate. I'm about to close the biggest deal of my life. And after that, we can start talking about a more permanent arrangement." Chloe's eyes lit up. This was it. This was the moment he'd finally leave his boring, ornamental wife. As the elevator doors whispered shut, sealing them in their golden bubble, Richard felt a familiar rush of triumph. He had it all. A brilliant career, a beautiful mistress, and a docile wife at home managing the canapes. He was untouchable. Across town, in a silent, sun-drenched study that Richard rarely entered, Elara Vance closed her laptop. The screen showed a single, blinking red dot on a GPS map, tracking her husband's phone. It was stationary, hovering directly over the address of the Aurelia Grand. She picked up her phone, not her personal one, but a sleek, encrypted device. She pressed the number 1 on her speed dial. A man with a gravelly professional voice answered on the first ring. "Harrison." "He's in, Robert," Elara said, her voice no longer soft and melodic, but sharp and metallic, like a finely honed blade. "He's at the hotel, in the presidential suite." "The documents are prepared, Madam Maris," the lawyer, Robert Harrison, replied. "The board meeting is scheduled for 8 p.m. tomorrow. The staff has been notified of the surprise inspection." "Good," Elara said. She stood and walked to a floor-to-ceiling mirror. She looked at her reflection, the perfect wife in the beige cashmere sweater set. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she pulled her hair back into a severe, powerful bun. The woman staring back was not Elara Vance. "I'll see you tomorrow, Robert," she said. "It's time I reintroduced myself to my husband, and to my company." She hung up, the nameplate on the desk gleaming in the light. It didn't say Elara Vance. It read, Elara Maris, Chairwoman. Richard Vance had made one critical, and soon-to-be fatal, miscalculation. He had married Elara Maris, assuming the Maris was irrelevant. When they met 10 years prior, he was a hungry, ambitious analyst, and she was a quiet, unassuming art history student. He'd asked about her family, and she'd given him a half-truth. "My father is in hospitality. Very quiet. Mostly management." Richard, whose entire worldview was based on brands and prestige, heard hospitality and thought motel manager. He pictured a beige-suited man running a chain of dreary airport hotels. He'd smiled, condescendingly, and said, "Well, everyone has to start somewhere." He'd then spent the rest of the dinner talking about his own inevitable rise. He never asked again. He never wondered why her quiet family paid for her education in full, or why she had an encyclopedic knowledge of corporate law and architectural engineering, which she passed off as hobbies. He did not know Arthur Maris. Arthur Maris was a titan of a different kind. He was a man who built an empire in silence. The Maris Hospitality Group wasn't a public-facing brand. It was the global holding company that owned the brands. They didn't just manage hotels, they owned the land, the buildings, and the multi-billion-dollar management contracts for some of the most exclusive properties on Earth. The Aurelia Grand was his crown jewel, the first hotel he'd ever put his family name, Maris, on, albeit discreetly, within the corporate structure. Arthur had adored his daughter. He'd raised her not as a princess, but as a successor. While Richard was learning to leverage debt, Elara was learning to build legacies. "Power is quiet, Elara," Arthur used to tell her. "Noise is for the insecure. Noise is for men like that new husband of yours. Let him bang his drum. You just own the drum." When Arthur Maris passed away 6 months ago, Richard had attended the funeral, bored and checking his stock tickers. He'd processed the small inheritance Elara received as nothing more than a modest windfall, enough to redecorate the house. In reality, Arthur Maris had left his daughter 51% of Maris Hospitality Group. He had left her a global empire. Elara had been playing a part for a decade. She'd loved Richard once, or at least the man she thought he could be. But his ambition had curdled into arrogance, his confidence into contempt. She stayed, not out of weakness, but out of duty to her father, who had been ill for the last few years. Then she found the phone. 2 months ago, while searching for his passport for a real business trip, she'd found a second, sleek smartphone tucked into his ski boot in the back of his closet. The password, pathetically, was VanceCap1. The phone contained a full, unadulterated history of his betrayal, the texts with Chloe Jensen, the strategy sessions, the venomous, dismissive things he said about his wife. "Chloe, are you sure she doesn't suspect? She's so smart." Richard, "Elara, she's smart about flowers and fabric swatches. She has no idea what a real balance sheet looks like. She's a relic. You're the future, baby." That was the night Elara Vance died, and Elara Maris took over. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She called Robert Harrison, her family's lawyer, and began to move. "He's been reckless," she'd told Harrison in their first meeting, her voice pure ice. "He's been funding this affair with company funds, classifying them as client entertainment. He thinks he's a genius. He is a genius in his own way," Harrison had replied, "a genius at self-destruction. But Elara, there's something else. Something you found." Elara slid a folder across the polished mahogany table. "Richard thinks he built Vance Capital from scratch. He boasts about his first big investor, a silent partner who gave him $10 million 8 years ago." Harrison opened the folder. His eyebrows shot up. "My God, M.I. Holdings." "M.I. Holdings," Elara said. "Maris Investments. My father. Richard was so arrogant, so desperate to prove himself, he never did his due diligence on his own seed funding. My father saw his ambition and his weakness. He funded him, not as an investment, but as a contingency. He called it Richard's leash. My father's holding company is the primary silent investor in Vance Capital. So, you not only own the hotel he's in," Harrison said, a slow smile spreading. "You own him." "I own the ground he walks on," Elara stated, "and tomorrow I'm going to remind him of that. He's been living in my world. I've just been letting him think it was his." Her plan was simple, brutal, and elegant. She had bided her time for 2 months. She let the board of Maris Hospitality, who were all her father's loyalists, unanimously and secretly vote her in as the new active chairwoman. The public announcement was scheduled for the next day. She'd known Richard was planning this trip with Chloe. She'd even seen the hotel booking. He'd used a travel agent connected to Vance Capital, arrogant as ever. He was walking into her fortress, into the one place on earth where his name meant nothing and hers meant everything. Now, as she stood in her study, she unpinned a framed photo of her and Richard on their wedding day. He was beaming, triumphant. She looked happy, but in her own eyes she saw the shadow of the woman she'd suppressed. She set the photo face down on her desk. She picked up a slim, black folder. It was the quarterly report for the Aurelia Grand. "Time to go to work," she said. The presidential suite was, in a word, obscene. It was less a hotel room and more a 2-story penthouse apartment, complete with a private glass-walled elevator, a baby grand piano, and a sprawling terrace with an infinity-edge plunge pool that seemed to spill into the city skyline 50 floors below. "This, baby," Richard declared, popping the cork on a bottle of 1996 Dom Perignon, "is how you live." Chloe spun around in the center of the massive living room, her arms outstretched. "Richard, it's breathtaking. It must be costing a fortune." "It is," he said, handing her a flute of champagne. "And I'm expensing every penny of it to the firm. Executive retreat. It's important to keep the CEO relaxed." He laughed, a smug, barking sound. He loosened his tie, his eyes raking over her. She was wearing a red silk dress that looked spectacular and expensive. He had, of course, paid for it. "To us," he said, clinking his glass against hers. "To the future. And to finally being free of complications." Chloe's smile faltered slightly. "Complications? You mean Elara?" She sat on the edge of the cream-colored sofa, her posture suddenly insecure. "When are you going to tell her, Richard? Really tell her?" Richard sighed, annoyed. This was the one part of the script he hated. "Soon, I told you. These things have to be handled delicately. Divorces are messy, especially with her sensibilities. She's fragile." "Fragile?" Chloe asked, sipping her champagne. "She seems so composed. I see her in the society pages. She's always at that hospital charity. She's beautiful." "She's a photo, Chloe, that's all. She's an image. There's nothing under it," Richard said, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows. He looked down at the city, a glittering tapestry of lights. He felt like an emperor. "She hasn't had to work a day in her life," he continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "Her father was some mid-level hotel manager. She inherited a bit of money, enough to play pretend. But this," he gestured to the view, the suite, the power. "This is real. I built this. She wouldn't know the first thing about what it takes to earn this." He sat next to Chloe, pulling her close. "You know what she's doing right now? She's probably agonizing over floral arrangements for the gala, deciding between lilies and roses. That's her world, Chloe, and it's pathetic." He kissed her, hard. "Our world is this. It's power. It's the apex. The apex. The restaurant, darling. Rooftop. Impossible to get a reservation. I had my assistant call 6 times. We're in for 8:30 p.m. tomorrow. Best table in the house. We'll order the Chateau Lafitte Rothschild, the one I told you about. We'll toast to our new beginning." Chloe melted against him. This was the man she wanted. Powerful, decisive, and rich. He was right. His wife was a relic from a bygone era. Chloe was the future. "What about the deal, Richard?" she asked, nestling her head on his chest. "The one you're closing this weekend?" Richard smirked. "The deal is already done. It's a massive acquisition. The final papers are just a formality. This weekend," he nuzzled her neck, "is purely for pleasure, and to celebrate the man who made it happen. Me." For the next 24 hours they lived in a bubble of pure decadence. They ordered room service from a menu that had no prices. They swam in their private pool. They made plans for their future, a future built on Richard's genius and funded by his self-made fortune. Richard felt invincible, wrapped in the opulence of the Aurelia Grand, a hotel he now considered his personal playground. He never once wondered how his reservation, which had been repeatedly denied to his assistant, was suddenly confirmed for the presidential suite. He assumed, as he always did, that the world had simply bent to his will. He didn't know that Elara herself had approved the booking. "Mr. Vance is requesting the presidential suite?" she had asked her new general manager, a sharp Frenchman named Antoine Dubois, just the day before. "Yes, Madam Chairwoman," Dubois had said, looking at the request with disdain. "He is insistent. He's with a Ms. Jensen. His assistant has been very difficult." Elara had smiled, a thin, cold smile. "Oh, by all means, Mr. Dubois. Give him the suite. Give him the Dom Perignon. Give him everything he asks for. And the dinner reservation at the Apex for tomorrow at 8:30? I want you to personally confirm it." "But, Madam," Dubois hesitated, "that is the same time as your inaugural dinner. We have the owner's table reserved for you." "Exactly," Elara said. "Place Mr. Vance and his guest at table 12, the one directly across from the owner's table." Dubois, a veteran of high-stakes hospitality, finally understood. A slow, appreciative smile spread across his face. "It will be my pleasure, Madam Chairwoman. Consider it handled." The staff entrance of the Aurelia Grand was a world away from the opulent lobby. It was a place of steel, efficiency, and quiet professionalism. At 7 p.m. on Tuesday, this was where Elara Maris chose to enter her hotel. She arrived not in a Bentley, but in a nondescript black Audi sedan, driven by her lawyer, Robert Harrison. She wore no jewelry save for her simple gold wedding band, an item she planned to remove before the night was over, and a $20,000 Patek Philippe watch. Her attire was a bespoke navy blue suit, its lines severe and commanding. When she stepped out, General Manager Antoine Dubois and the entire executive team were waiting, lined up in the receiving bay. They had been told for weeks about the new chairwoman, the mysterious Maris, who had inherited the empire. They were expecting a soft-handed heiress, a socialite who would want to talk about new lobby furniture. The woman who strode toward them was not a socialite. She was a CEO. "Mr. Dubois," she said, her voice crisp, extending a hand. "A pleasure to finally meet you in person. Ms. Taylor, your CFO. Mr. Hayes, head of operations. I've read all of your reports. Your Q3 numbers on F&B are impressive, Mr. Hayes, but your overhead on supplier contracts is soft. We'll discuss." The team snapped to attention. This was not the woman they expected. "Welcome, Madam Chairwoman," Dubois said, recovering first. "We are honored. The grand ballroom is ready for your staff address." "Excellent. And security?" "In place," Dubois confirmed. 2 plainclothes officers as you requested. They are aware of the situation with Mr. Vance." "Good," Elara said. "He is not to be embarrassed. He is merely to be managed. Understood?" "Perfectly, madam." As they walked through the immaculate back-of-house corridors, Elara moved with a purpose that silenced the usual kitchen clatter. She didn't just walk, she commanded the space. In the grand ballroom, over 300 senior staff members were assembled. Elara stepped onto the stage, and a hush fell. She tapped the microphone once. "Good evening," she began, her voice filling the room without a tremor. "My name is Elara Maris. For many years, my father, Arthur Maris, built this company in silence. He believed that luxury was not about noise, but about substance. He has passed that legacy to me, and I am here tonight to tell you that the era of silence is over." She spoke for 20 minutes, laying out a new, aggressive vision for the company. Expansion into Asia, a new tech platform, a sustainability initiative. She was brilliant, informed, and utterly in control. She knew their names, their departments, their challenges. When she finished, the room erupted in spontaneous, thunderous applause. They weren't just clapping for an owner, they were clapping for a leader. As the staff dispersed, buzzing with excitement, Elara turned to Dubois. Now, she said, checking her watch. 8:15 p.m. I believe I have a dinner reservation. This way, Madam Chairwoman. They took a private elevator, the real one, not the one for the presidential suite, directly to the rooftop restaurant. The apex was designed for moments like this. The ceiling was a retractable glass dome, open to the stars. The tables were set far apart, creating islands of privacy. The ambiance was one of hushed, expensive reverence. The head waitress bowed deeply. Madam Chairwoman, your table is ready. As requested. Thank you, Jean-Pierre, Elara said. Has Mr. Vance's party been seated? Yes, madam. Table 12. They arrived 10 minutes ago. They have already ordered the 2005 Chateau Lafite Rothschild. Of course he did, Elara said, a flicker of a smile playing on her lips. Put it on my bill. Madam? A parting gift, she said. Now please, show me to my table. She was seated at the grand owner's table, a large, semicircular booth that had the best view of both the city and the entire restaurant. Her security detail took up a discreet table near the kitchen entrance. Mr. Dubois stood by her side for a moment, waiting for instructions. You may go, Antoine, she said. Enjoy your evening. I will handle this personally. As you wish, madam. Elara sat, placing her black leather satchel on the seat beside her. She didn't look across the room. She didn't need to. She could feel his eyes on her. She calmly opened the wine list, her heart a steady, cold drum. The trap was set. Now, she just had to wait for the animal to realize it was caught. Richard Vance was irritated. First, the head waitress at the Apex had greeted him with a polite but unimpressed, "Ah, yes, Mr. Vance. Table 12. This way." Table 12 was fine. It was by a window, but it was not, he noted with a scowl, the central elevated table he had demanded. Second, the wine he'd ordered, the $4,000 Lafite Rothschild, had been presented with a simple, "A fine choice, sir," by a sommelier who seemed utterly unfazed by the expense. "This place is a bit stuck up, isn't it?" Chloe whispered, trying to break the tense silence. "It's called class, darling," Richard snapped, though he felt slighted. "They're just playing hard to get. They know who I am." He was scanning the restaurant, mentally critiquing the service, when she walked in. He didn't recognize her at first. He saw a woman in a power suit, flanked by the hotel's top brass, including the GM, Antoine Dubois. She was being led to the exact table he had wanted, the owner's table. "Look at that," he sneered to Chloe. "Must be some local politician getting the royal treatment." Then the woman turned, and the light from the city skyline hit her face. Richard's champagne flute stopped halfway to his lips. His blood ran cold. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." Chloe followed his gaze. "What? Who is? Oh my God, Richard, is that—" It was Elara, but it wasn't his Elara. This was not the woman who arranged flowers. This woman was radiating an aura of power so intense it was almost a physical force. She looked like she could buy and sell the entire room. Richard's first emotion was not guilt. It was rage. She had followed him, the sheer audacity. "She followed me," he snarled, his face turning a dark, mottled red. That... She's trying to embarrass me." "Richard, don't," Chloe hissed, grabbing his arm as he started to stand up. "Everyone is watching. Maybe it's a coincidence?" A coincidence? In this hotel? At this restaurant? On the same night? He threw his napkin down. "I'm going to put an end to this. This is my weekend. She has no right." He shoved his chair back, the sound scraping loudly in the quiet restaurant. He strode across the plush carpet, his mind racing. How dare she? What did she think she was doing? Was she going to make a scene? He'd have her thrown out. As he approached, a man in a dark suit, one of Elara's security team, stepped partially into his path. But Elara, without looking up from her menu, simply raised a single elegant hand. The man stopped. Richard stormed up to the table. "Elara!" he barked. Elara looked up slowly. Her expression was not one of shock or anger or heartbreak. It was one of mild, clinical curiosity, as if a stranger had interrupted her meal. "Richard," she said, her voice calm and even. "What a surprise. I thought you were in Tokyo." The coldness of her delivery stopped him in his tracks. What are you doing here? What is this? Are you spying on me?" "I'm having dinner, Richard, at my restaurant." Your restaurant? What are you talking about? Did you follow me here to try and... What, catch me? Is that it? You're pathetic." Chloe had now come up behind him, her face pale with humiliation and fear. Elara finally turned her gaze to her. "Miss Jensen, a pleasure to meet you in person. Richard has expensed many of your dinners. I hope you've enjoyed them." Chloe flinched as if she'd been slapped. Richard was sputtering. "How dare you speak to her? How dare you speak to me? I'll have you thrown out of here. I'm a guest in this hotel. I'm in the presidential suite." "Yes, you are," Elara said, taking a sip of water. "I approved it myself. It's my finest suite. I do hope you're enjoying the view." Richard stared, his mind unable to process her words. "You approved? Elara, what is this game?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Did you win the lottery? Did your motel manager father leave you a little more than I thought?" At that, Elara's mask of calm finally dropped, replaced by a look of profound, icy pity. "My father," she said, "was Arthur Maris." The name hung in the air. Richard didn't react. The name meant nothing to him. "I don't know who that is," he scoffed. "You should," Elara said. "He founded Maris Hospitality, the company that built, owns and operates this hotel, the Aurelia Grand, named for my grandmother, Aurelia Maris." Richard's sneer froze. He looked around at the deferential staff, at Mr. Dubois, who was now approaching the table with a look of grim purpose. "And when my father passed away 6 months ago," Elara continued, her voice cutting through his fog of denial, "he left me his controlling interest. I am and have been for 2 months the chairwoman of the board of Maris Hospitality." Richard physically recoiled. He looked at Dubois. Is she? Mr. Dubois nodded gravely. "Good evening, Mr. Vance. May I be the first to formally introduce you to Ms. Elara Maris, our chairwoman?" Richard's world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from his face. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. No. You arrange flowers." "I do," Elara said. "I'm very good at it. I am also, as it turns out, very good at forensic accounting and asset management and corporate governance." This is a lie," Richard stammered, his bravado crumbling into dust, revealing the terrified, weak man beneath. "You're lying." "Am I?" Elara asked. She motioned to Mr. Dubois. "Mr. Dubois, please present Mr. Vance with his bill." "My bill? We haven't even had our entrees." "Not for the meal, Richard. For the room," Elara said. Dubois discreetly slid a leather-bound folio onto the table. "The bill for the presidential suite, Mr. Vance. 3 nights at the full rack rate, plus amenities, room service, and the $22,000 diamond pendant you purchased from the hotel's Boucheron boutique this afternoon for Ms. Jensen." Richard looked at the total. His eyes bulged. This is... I'm expensing this to Vance Capital." "Ah," Elara said. "Now we come to the real problem." This, Elara thought, was the moment, the noise her father had warned her about, and Richard was making all of it. "There's a problem with Vance Capital, Richard," Elara said, her voice remaining perfectly level, though it now carried a surgical precision. "My firm? My firm is none of your business," he shot back, his panic making him loud. Other diners were staring, pretending not to. "On the contrary," Elara said. She reached into her black satchel and pulled out a single bound document. She slid it across the table. "It's very much my business. You see, you've been sloppy." Richard looked at the cover. Vance Capital, Special Audit, prepared by Maris Investments. "Maris Investments," he whispered, his hands trembling as he opened it. "You always did love to tell the story of your first big break," Elara said, as if narrating a bedtime story. "How you, a brilliant young analyst, secured $10 million from a mysterious, silent partner. MI Holdings. You never bothered to dig very deep, did you? You were so proud of your self-made status." She leaned forward. "MI Holdings, Maris Investments, my father's private equity firm. He saw you, Richard. He saw your hunger, and he saw your gaping, arrogant flaws. He didn't invest in you. He bought you. He put a leash on you, just in case you ever hurt me." Richard was no longer breathing. He was staring at charts, at highlighted bank transfers, at his own signature. "You've been embezzling, Richard," Elara stated flatly, "for years. Small amounts at first, then larger. This trip, Ms. Jensen's apartment lease, the watches, the cars. You've been stealing from your own company, which means you've been stealing from my company, my father's company." Chloe Jensen let out a small, strangled sob. "Richard, you told me you owned it all." "Shut up, Chloe," he roared, but there was no heat in it, only terror. "As the majority shareholder," Elara continued, "I called for an emergency board meeting via proxy vote this afternoon. It was unanimous. You are, as of 5 p.m. today, removed as CEO of Vance Capital, pending a full criminal investigation." Richard Vance collapsed into the chair. "The Amex you used to check in? It was a corporate card. It was cancelled an hour ago," Elara said. "The Bentley you drove here? It's leased by the firm. It's being towed from the hotel garage as we speak. The mansion, our home, was purchased by MI Holdings and leased back to you for $100 a year. A fact you never noticed." Richard looked up, his face a mask of utter, complete ruin. He was, for the first time in his life, silent. Elara finally looked at Chloe. The young woman was crying, her makeup running. She was not a villain. She was just a fool, led by a bigger one. "Ms. Jensen," Elara said, her voice softening, almost imperceptibly. "You are ambitious. You hitched your wagon to the wrong man. I suggest you find your own way out of the hotel. Your name is not on the reservation, and the man you came with has no money and no power." Chloe looked at Richard, this hollow, broken shell, and then back at the impossible, powerful woman in front of her. Without a word, she turned and fled the restaurant, her sobs echoing behind her. Now it was just Richard and Elara. "Why?" he finally whispered, his voice broken. "Elara, why do this? So, publicly?" Elara stood up, smoothing the front of her suit jacket. She looked down at the man who had called her domestic, hollow, and pathetic. "Because you did this publicly, Richard. You brought your associate to my hotel. You put her in my suite. You drank my champagne. You did it all believing I was a fool you kept in a gilded cage back home, arranging flowers." She picked up her satchel. "You're right about one thing. I am very good with arrangements, and I've just rearranged your entire life. You will hear from my lawyer, Robert Harrison, in the morning regarding the divorce, and I suspect you'll be hearing from the district attorney shortly after." She turned to leave. "Elara, wait!" he cried out, a desperate, pathetic sound. "Please don't leave me. What am I supposed to do?" Elara paused at the edge of the table. She looked back at him, her face completely unreadable. "I believe," she said, "the bus station is 3 blocks east." She walked out of the restaurant. The header waitress held the door for her. Mr. Dubois was waiting by the elevator. Not a single diner made a sound. As the elevator doors closed, sealing her in, Elara finally let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for 10 years. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel happy. She felt free. The silence that fell in the apex was absolute. It was a dense, heavy void, broken only by the distant, ironic sound of a single champagne flute clinking somewhere across the room. Richard Vance sat paralyzed in the chair he had collapsed into, his skin the color of ash. The woman who had been his wife for a decade, the woman he had dismissed as a simple, pretty ornament, was already halfway to the private elevator. "Elara, wait!" he had cried, a desperate, hollow sound. She paused but did not turn. Her final words, "I believe the bus station is 3 blocks east," hung in the air, a sentence of execution delivered with the casual disinterest of a weather report. Then she was gone. The elevator doors whispered shut, a final metallic snick that sealed his fate. For a full 30 seconds, Richard did not move. He was a statue of his own ruin. The other diners, the city's elite, were now staring openly, their masks of polite indifference completely gone. They smelled blood, the catastrophic failure of one of their own. Then, Mr. Dubois, the general manager, and Jean-Pierre, the header waitress, materialized at his table. They were no longer deferential. Their expressions were ones of cool, professional finality. "Mr. Vance," Dubois said, his voice quiet but firm, no longer cloaked in the niceties of hospitality. "Your presence here is concluded." The wine," Richard stammered, his mind grasping for any piece of his old reality. "The Lafitte." "Indeed, sir," Jean-Pierre said, gliding forward. He presented a small, black leather billfold. The chairwoman was kind enough to cover the bottle. However, your personal card, the one you used for the initial reservation deposit, was just declined for the remainder of your meal. Declined. The word hit him like a physical blow. He fumbled for his wallet, his hands shaking so violently he could barely extract his private black card. "Run it again," he commanded, his voice a pathetic attempt at its former authority. Jean-Pierre didn't even take the card. "It will not be necessary, sir. The card is cancelled. As Madam Chairwoman mentioned, all your corporate accounts have been frozen." My personal... "We are informed they are linked, sir," Dubois said, his patience visibly thinning. "You must leave. Now." The walk from table 12 to the main elevator was the longest of Richard's life. He felt the burn of 100 eyes on his back. He, who had always strode through rooms as if he owned them, was now being ushered out like a common drunk. He stumbled, his $4,000 Italian shoes feeling like lead. In the lobby, he instinctively reached for his phone to call his driver. She said the car was towed. He scrolled, desperate. His banking apps flashed red, account access denied. His corporate email, user not found. His private equity partners, the ones he'd golfed with just last week. Their names were gone, their numbers blocked. He was an island, and the tide had just erased him. He pushed through the revolving doors. The humid night air hit him. The line of black town cars and Bentleys sat gleaming, their drivers waiting for other, more important men. Richard Vance, the titan of finance, stood on the curb, his monogrammed suit suddenly feeling like a cheap costume. He had no car. He had no cash. He had no one. He looked east in the direction Elara had pointed. He, the man who had lived in the presidential suite, raised a trembling hand and hailed a yellow taxi. The story exploded. By 9 a.m. the next morning, it was the only thing Wall Street was talking about. The press, sensing a drama far juicier than a standard corporate restructuring, descended. "The ghost heiress," screamed the New York Post. "Vance Capital implodes. CEO ousted by quiet. Wife in hotel takeover," declared the Wall Street Journal. Forbes ran a detailed profile. Who is Elara Maris, the billionaire heiress who hid in plain sight? In a glass-walled conference room on the 48th floor of the Maris Hospitality headquarters, Elara, now dressed in a charcoal grey sheath dress, presided over a war room. Robert Harrison was to her left, and to her right was a sleek, sharp woman named Lena Petrov, the head of a crisis PR firm so exclusive its name wasn't even on the door. "They're painting you as a vengeful wife," Lena said, scrolling through a tablet. "It's dramatic, but it's messy. It opens you up to accusations of emotional decision-making." Elara shook her head, her gaze firm. "No, we will not engage with that narrative. My personal life is irrelevant. The story is this and only this. Maris Hospitality, a majority shareholder in Vance Capital, uncovered catastrophic financial irregularities. We identified extensive fraud and embezzlement." She looked at Robert. "Robert, you will release the preliminary audit findings to the SEC and the Journal at 11 a.m. sharp." Robert nodded. "The wire transfers of firm capital to Ms. Jensen's lease agreement are particularly compelling." "Good," Elara continued, turning back to Lena. "Our narrative is one of swift, decisive corporate governance. We acted to protect our investors and stabilize the firm. Richard Vance's personal betrayals are a footnote. His professional ones are the headline. This was not revenge. This was a correction." Lena Petrov, a woman who had managed scandals for presidents and oil barons, felt a genuine shiver of admiration. "A correction. I like that. Clean. Powerful. They'll call you the Iron Orchid." "They can call me whatever they like," Elara said, standing up, "as long as they call the new CEO of Vance Capital for a quote. Is Sarah in place?" "She is," Robert confirmed. "She's already frozen the trading floor and is preparing a statement for the employees." Sarah Collins, the brilliant analyst Richard had consistently ignored and belittled, was now his replacement. Across town, Richard was experiencing the narrative from the other side. He was still in the mansion, a place that no longer felt like his. He'd been screaming at his lawyers for an hour, the ones he could still get on the phone, when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a lawyer, it was a process server, a bored-looking man who handed him 2 thick envelopes. The first was the divorce filing. Irreconcilable differences and, he scanned the page, gross financial misconduct. The second was an eviction notice. Richard laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Eviction? From my house? She's insane." His last remaining lawyer, a junior partner who was already regretting taking the call, spoke over the speakerphone. "Richard, I just got off the phone with Harrison's office. The house, you don't own it. MI Holdings, that's Maris Investments, has held the deed since you bought it. You've been on a 1-a-year lease. They terminated it. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises." The phone dropped from Richard's hand. He was, as Elara had said, a guest. He had always been a guest. Chloe Jensen was a symptom, not the disease. She had fled the Apex and taken a taxi, one she paid for herself, back to the sleek, modern apartment Richard had called their nest. She spent the night packing, a cold, methodical panic driving her. She knew, with absolute certainty, that her life in this city was over. The next morning, a courier arrived. It was a simple, flat envelope from R. Harrison and Associates. She tore it open, expecting a lawsuit, a subpoena. Inside was a cashier's check for 50,000 Dolzels, and a single, unheaded note, typed in a simple, elegant font. Ms. Jensen, Richard was wrong about you. You are not the future. You are your future. Do not waste it on another man like him. The enclosed is the sum total of salary and bonuses he funneled to you from company accounts. I have classified it as a severance. I advise you to take it and build a life of your own. You will not be contacted again. Chloe stared at the check, then at the note. There was no signature, but she knew who it was from. It wasn't an act of kindness. It was an act of closure. It was Elara Maris, the chairwoman, cutting a final, insignificant loose end. It was the most terrifying and most liberating thing that had ever happened to her. She looked at the check. It was more money than her parents made in a year. Richard had promised her the world. Elara had just given her a bus ticket out of hell. Chloe didn't cry. She cashed the check, booked a one-way flight back to Ohio, and by the time the evening news was running, Richard's disgraced photo, she was gone. Weeks turned into a month. The restructuring of Vance Capital was brutal and efficient. Elara, working with the new CEO, Sarah Collins, was a surgeon. She cut the fat, the yes men Richard had hired, the vanity projects, the bloated expense accounts. But she saved the core. She identified the real talent, the people Richard had overlooked, and she empowered them. She didn't just save the company, she made it better. She made it profitable. Richard's fall, meanwhile, was complete. He was charged by the district attorney with multiple counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. His few remaining assets were frozen, pending the outcome of the trial. His high-powered friends no longer returned his calls. He was a pariah. He was forced to move into a drab, furnished one-bedroom apartment in a part of the city he used to fly over. He was a ghost in his own life, haunted by the spectre of the woman he had underestimated. He would sit in the dark, watching the financial news, and she would be there. Elara Maris was no longer a hidden anything. She was a powerhouse. She was on panels, on magazine covers. She spoke with an eloquence and intelligence that captivated the very world that had once belonged to him. She was brilliant. She was ruthless. She was everything he had pretended to be. He would watch her, his heart a toxic mix of hatred and a strange, agonizing longing. He hadn't just lost his money. He had lost his witness. He had lost the one person whose admiration he'd craved, even as he'd systematically destroyed it. He had called her a porcelain doll, but he was the one who had shattered. 2 months to the day after the night at the Apex, Elara stood on a private terrace. It was not the terrace of the presidential suite. This was the real owner's penthouse, a residence her father had built on the roof, hidden from all public plans, a sanctuary of quiet, masculine elegance, filled with books on architecture, history, and art. A single candid photo sat on the teak desk, her and her father, laughing on a sailboat. She was not in a suit. She was in a simple cashmere robe, a cup of tea steaming in her hand. The city spread out before her, a glittering, silent kingdom. Her kingdom. Her private phone buzzed. It was Robert Harrison. "It's done, Elara," he said, his voice warm. "The trial? No, that will drag on for months. But this is done. The judge signed the final decree this afternoon. Your divorce is finalized." He didn't contest a single point. He had nothing to contest. The prenup was ironclad. Elara smiled, a small, genuine smile. That wasn't a prenup, Robert. You know that. My father called it a partnership agreement. He just made sure I held all the assets from the beginning. Robert chuckled. Arthur Maris. He was always 5 steps ahead of everyone. He would be so incredibly proud of you, Elara. I hope so, Robert. Thank you. For everything. She hung up and looked at the name on her phone screen. Elara Maris. Not Vance. The last piece of him was gone. She thought of Richard, a small, angry man in a small, cheap room, consumed by his own arrogance. He had believed the world revolved around him, that she revolved around him. He never understood that the gilded cage he'd built for her was, in fact, her fortress. He had been a guest, a long-term visitor in her world. He mistook her silence for weakness, her grace for fragility. He never realized that the quiet, delicate porcelain doll was, in fact, the one who owned the entire dollhouse. He was just the one she'd finally decided to put back in the box. Elara Maris, chairwoman of Maris Hospitality, took a sip of her tea. The air was cool. The night was clear. The work wasn't over. The work was just beginning. And for the first time in a decade, she felt the exhilarating, terrifying, and absolute thrill of being completely and powerfully free. He built his life on arrogance and lies, forgetting the cardinal rule. Never underestimate the person you think you own. She didn't just take back her life. She took back her power, her name, and the empire he never even knew existed. In the end, he was just a temporary guest in her world. What did you think of Elara's revenge? Was it too cold, or was it the perfect response to his ultimate betrayal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of power, deception, and sweet justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a good story, and please subscribe to our channel for more dramatic real-life stories every single week. You won't want to miss what's coming next.